Andy, do you remember when we would be like at church in the atrium or maybe standing in a circle or talking to each other, and a man would come up and join our circle of conversation? And when he would leave, you would say something like, "Why are you so weird with men?"
Why did I say that?
Yeah.
Because you took a normal, fun conversation and it was
brought
like
the energy down.
Kamikaze conversation. And then the thing was, I felt so bad because he'd be like, "Oh yeah, dude, we're having fun." Melissa's here. I gotta go. And he like ran away, and we all felt like,
But
good one done.
I would never really notice it until all of this stuff with my sexual abuse came to a head and sort of boiled over in 2018. And then about a year later, it was 2019, you're gonna remember this, I had decided, wait, I don't think that's right. It took me some time.
Congratulations.
Here's what I realized. Am I missing out on the spiritual benefit of being the body of Christ? I am only friends or only really relate to women. What am I missing out on when I'm not willing to have godly, good male friendships? That's what we're talking about today. Are you ready?
I am so ready to see where you're going to take this thing.
She doesn't know what we're going to talk about.
Nope.
Hello friends, Editing Melissa here. I just need a small little preamble to this video, per usual. First of all, was asking Jared if he minded this video at all, because I'll be talking about sexual attraction and what that looks like for me. And not just in regards to Jared, but with other men. And he was not concerned about himself at all. He was concerned about you. He was like, Melissa, you've got to paint a picture that this is not all kicks and giggles. He said, processing through sexual abuse and all of the aftermath that flows into things like what we're going to talk about today. He's like, remember, Melissa, this almost took you down. He had a front row seat to watch how difficult this whole process has been. And I was so supported. I mean, I was propped up and still am propped up on every side. So he's like, Melissa, there's women out there that aren't so supported. Be gentle, be careful. And it was so wise. It felt like a gift from God for him to say that. And so what I want to tell you is two things. Number one, why I decided to move forward with this video after going back and forth of, is the risk worth it? Should I put myself out there? What if I am damaging to you? Is it worth the risk? And I decided that it was, because we are not talking about this stuff within the church that I'm hearing. I'm sure it's being talked about. And I've heard rules talked about, but I don't want a conversation about rules. I want the heart of the matter. And so it feels like an important conversation to have. I also think it's extremely important for women to hear other women voice things that maybe they think they're alone in. Andy is on one extreme, I'm on the other. And my hope is that you will find it beneficial in some way to hear us voice what most people are not talking about. The last thing, just know that this is Andy and my personal experience. This does not mean that this is how you should do it or what it should look like for you. This is just what we have personally done and what has worked for us in our very unique situation. Preamble over. Friends, if you don't know, this is my ministry partner, Andrea Bruce.
Hi, friends.
We have been doing ministry together for 12 years,
Yes.
which feels like an eternity.
It does.
In 2019, like I said, I went on this, it felt like a real intentional adventure of, I'm going to
Find a man.
We're going to get to your boundaries.
That would be the illustration of my boundary problem.
To be friends with a couple of safe men. I was asking myself, Melissa, why do you have, and if I had to visualize it here, I'm going to throw it up on the screen for you. If I had to visualize my boundaries, so here I am. They were like 10 feet tall and concrete. So we're talking concrete slabs and maybe 5 foot thick. Nobody, no man, this is with men only. No man was going to get over these boundaries. So if this is like a little friend out here, that's the weirdness you would feel, was my boundaries would go up and it's like I'm telepathically telling them, get away.
Yeah.
Move out of this circle. I started asking myself, why? Now, I've said a lot on this channel that I experienced sexual abuse as a child. Well, Melissa, you're afraid of that man because men have hurt you before sexually, so you're trying to keep him at a distance. That was not it. After deep reflection, and as I started to talk about these concrete boundaries, I realized it's not the man I don't trust, it's me.
Yeah.
I do not trust me. I remember feeling at 11 and 12, that was not when the abuse began, but I think it began in a different way. Let's just say that. I began, it's not thinking, it's more like feeling, or it was like a coat I was wearing that was, I'm the other woman. I wore that very young, like I am an adulterer. It is a married man to a woman who is a mother type figure to me. And I am the other woman at 11 years old. I'm the other woman. And I did not realize how much of an identity that was. And if you think you're some sort of, what would that be? Adulterous, luring kind of person, I'm like, I've got to protect me and protect them because of who I am. And that was really a big deal to realize that that was actually the root of my boundaries, of having them so thick and so high, is not trusting myself. So those are my boundaries and what it looks like. Andy, do you mind sharing with us?
Yeah.
What are your boundaries and why do those boundaries exist?
Okay, so where yours are embarrassing on that side because of the social impact it has on others, mine are certainly embarrassing, but because of the social impact it has on me, meaning I would do things, Melissa, if I rewound the clock, I would never do it. I'm talking put my foot in my mouth over and over and over again, say things, be way too close. And if your boundary was this fortified, Melissa, to conceal or keep your almost promiscuity or whatever word you want to put locked in.
Sexuality, probably.
Mine was the opposite. So do you mind if I draw it?
Yeah.
So if this is me as I'm not just talking about a woman, a little girl always. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw man number 1. So man 1. And man number 2. Man 2. And just for fun, let's just do 3 men. Are you okay with that?
That's fine.
Man number 3. So in my relationship with man number 1, it was like, I don't know, I'm going to use your illustration, okay? Liquid all over.
Let's make it blue.
Okay, so it's like liquid all over, and you could see it doesn't have a shape or a form. There's no definition. There's no understanding of how I am supposed to relate to a man as a Christian woman. So it's going to look different for man number 1. And then man number 2, it's going to look different based on how it feels. My feelings, I think, Melissa, determined the level of boundary I had for them. So every man, based on their receptivity or their lack of boundaries on their end coming toward me, I'm wide open.
So
your boundaries trump mine, but if mine get to have some authority to them, if they're receiving it, like receiving maybe some flirtation, maybe some closeness and proximity, maybe no flirtation, but depth of connection, it will be too much, too close, too soon, but not enough to look sinful.
So you would, when we talk about liquid boundaries, which is like not really a thing, I don't even think it's a real word or a real thing, but so I've got a cup right here. You would say that your boundaries weren't in a container.
No, they would go all
They would
over
spill.
the floor.
And when you spill something, it goes it goes fast, it goes quick, and it kind of soaks up everything that's around it.
Yeah. And it has no shape. It has no intention. Does that make sense?
It
just sort of landed.
Why were yours liquid?
Because unlike your sexual abuse that told you internally and emotionally that you were in the wrong as the other woman, my sexual abuse that happened with many men over many times over formative years told me this is what I'm good for, is providing pleasure to strangers, which hello has no boundary in it, made me valuable.
So as your boundaries are going out, does it feel like connection?
Acceptance.
And acceptance.
Acceptance, validation, affirmation. Therefore, his boundaries trumped mine. If he was going to be yucky, and maybe not men in our church, but men elsewhere, I kind of laid down and played dead like I did when I was 5. Can I say one thing in very, very much clarity to protect me?
Yeah.
I've never touched a man. I've never talked about sexual things with men.
Yeah. You've never had an affair.
No, I've never crossed a line where anybody except for maybe you have said, hey, guard up around this person. But Melissa, have you ever had to correct me? You've said, Andy,
I've said, be
your
careful.
language.
Yeah.
Yes, you'll say be careful. But here, Melissa, I was further than the line. I don't mean sex or lusting. I don't mean that at all. I mean my heart
emotionally
connecting. And it could happen and then be gone in an instant. You know what I mean? And I've moved on. So I want to be clear that just because I have these liquid boundaries it's probably not noticeable. And if you did notice it, you'd just say, one, that's Andy, or that's kind of,
that's kind of a little socially embarrassing or
unacceptable.
Awkward. Yeah.
But
it's Andy.
Yeah.
That's what it's going to feel like. I'm not sure what you're going to think about this. I have been talking to Jared about it because I've been thinking about it for maybe 2 years. He did not like this talk. All right, sexual attraction.
He didn't like this talk.
No, he did not. Jared is all heart. And, we've talked about like head, heart, hands. I am head first. My husband, Jared, is heart and relationship first. So the way I approach this makes him feel very, very sad.
Aww.
But it's real. When I realized in 2019 that I really wanted to move toward men, then I realized in an appropriate...
I know.
in an appropriate, godly way where there would be an exchange of gifting and that sort of thing for the growth.
Encouraging godly conversations with godly men.
To produce godly fruit.
Yeah.
I started to realize that I was deathly afraid of this sexual attraction. So I started thinking about it in 3 different ways. And this was helpful to me, I think mostly because I'm in my head, but I want to see how it lands on you. So the 3 different categories I thought was biology, past, and what I mean by that is both the good and the bad. So the sexual abuse, the great friendships, not with men, but just in general, how I was parented, like everything that has formed my makeup, my internal makeup, my past. And then also spiritually. Hey, it's me, editing Melissa again. I wanted to pop in here and tell you 2 things. 1, because I'm someone who thinks first, it is very comforting to me to figure something out intellectually first, especially if it's deeply emotional. Thinking is safety for me. Now, that may not be how you're wired, and that is okay. Just know that the next few minutes may seem very strange to you if you're not wired that way. Number 2, during the next few minutes, I perceived Andy to get very uncomfortable. Her leg was shaking the whole table during this next section. Now, I say that so that you may feel very uncomfortable, especially if you've had sexual abuse in your past. Because if you have had sexual abuse, there is a chance that you have internalized some shame around your body biologically responding while being abused. If you are not ready to hear a little bit more about that, please skip to the number. I will put it on the screen right here. Just fast forward until you hit that number and just pass it by. What I don't want you to do is feel worse after hearing this conversation. I want you to feel better. So please take care of yourself. So with our biology as male and female, God has wired us for sex. I mean, this is clear. Our biology, we've got hormones and sensory receptors. Because of our biology, that child that may be 11 or 14 or 9, her biology will respond. This gets very confusing. When we look at spiritual and we think of flesh versus spirit, and by flesh, I mean like the sinful part of us, spirit, the holy part of us, we get biology and flesh mixed up.
So when you say biology, you're referring to anatomy, like her body parts that could be aroused or not aroused.
Or even have an orgasm, being raped, being sexually molested. That is extremely confusing. And that brings biology, the way that we're wired to respond sexually, we start to call that flesh.
When you say flesh, do you mean the negative things that I should not desire? Oh, yeah.
We've got some distinguishing to do, but if we can first pull these into two completely separate categories. Now, for you and I, we have some work to do to even get past that, because both of us were sexually abused, which means our bodies were aroused far too young with people that had some amount of power over us. That means just straight out the gate, it is going to be a struggle for us to distinguish the two, because it can either feel really bad or we move toward it in a way that is unhealthy as well. My deepest fear is to feel sexual attraction to someone who is not my husband. I do not want to feel that. What I started to realize is that there is just some biology at play that is not sin, and it is not wrong, but hold, because it can get wrong in like 2.5 seconds. Do you remember the conversation?
I was hoping you were not going to go.
I'm not going to say, I'm not
not either.
Please tell me you have told no one.
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm not kidding you. I really am asking you.
I will never utter those words. Like, you know the flash stick on that movie?
Where they like make you go
blank.
Yes. My face is already red, but where there can be a biological response that literally you have no control over. Now, I can give an example as a man. Do you want to hear it? This is very fascinating to me. Like, study-wise, I've gone deep on hormones, and not just with sexuality, but hormones when it comes to maternal hormones and all kinds of things that translate into our
I would
behavior.
love to hear where you are.
Andy is not excited to hear, because she knows that when I get excited about a subject, I tend to ramble. So here I am to save you from hearing me talk about biology for the next 10 minutes. Several studies have been done to measure a man's biological response to a woman's fertility, more specifically to her ovulation. Now, when I say a man's biological response, I mean the chemical response that happens in his body that is based off of something that is outside of his body. Okay, let me explain. We all sweat out hormones, male or female, and these hormones have a particular smell that sticks to our clothing. So when a woman is ovulating, her scent will be different than other times of the month. If you've ever heard pheromones, that's sort of what this is. So in this particular study, they gave each man 4 shirts that a woman had worn during different stages of her cycle. The men were then asked to choose a shirt that smelled the best. More times than not, the men would choose the shirt the woman was wearing when she was ovulating. If the man chose the shirt of the woman who was ovulating, within 10 minutes of smelling that shirt, they would swab the side of his cheek, his saliva, And more times than not, his testosterone would have risen. Now, women also have a biological response when ovulating that increases sex drive, but I'm going to spare you those details, and you can thank me below in the comments.
Wow.
Is there anything that man can do about that?
No.
What does testosterone do when it increases? It increases your sex drive, which means he has not laid eyes on a woman. He has smelled a shirt, and his testosterone has increased. That's just biology. That's just biology. And that was a really good, terrible conversation that we had for me to voice this most terrible thing, because I'm an adulterer, which, can we hear me that at 11 I was not an adulterer, but this is how I felt.
Nor in your adult life.
Nor in my adult life. But this cloak that I was wearing is that, to be able to verbalize that to you was, I know, freeing, because I stopped hyper fixating on it. And guess what? When I stop hyper fixating on it, it just sort of diminishes. And the power diminishes.
So I'm going to bring just a teeny bit of clarity.
Yeah.
So what you were describing is verbalizing to me, a safe friend, a very selected safe friend, that your body was responding biologically to somebody that you weren't even attracted to.
Correct.
Why did you feel like that needed to be verbalized?
Because it felt like it was swirling on the inside of me, and I did not feel like telling my husband. Everybody will be different in their ways to do this. That didn't feel appropriate or right, at least at that time. But I knew I needed to say it if I wanted a sense of freedom, because it just kept looping and looping and then becoming more weird. And I couldn't get out of the loop. And my sense was, and I think it was from God, is like, tell Andy, you've got to open your mouth and tell Andy and be specific.
So when you did that, of course you wanted to go hide it
Yes.
and live under a rock for the rest of your life. But emotionally and spiritually, you say that brought freedom.
Lifted. Yeah.
It almost diminished after that,
Yeah.
right? Because I think what happens is when we keep these thoughts right between our two ears in our own mind, we believe that verbalizing those, what we consider yucky thoughts, is going to give
Enforce
more power.
it. Exactly. Yeah.
And it's untrue.
It's the opposite.
When our thoughts have freedom, which is what it is, to stay internal and not be spoken, we don't even realize we're giving it freedom to morph, to change, to grow, to have power and consume us. But man, I'm telling you, Melissa, when women let that thought go from here to cross their lips and their own ears hear something that is not from God, it removes the power of that secret or that thought. Sometimes in a moment. I've seen it over and over again.
Let's talk about how to guard. So what do we, not what do we not do, but what do we do to guard, whether we're in a marriage or we're single and there's married men around us? There's that same kind of guard that has to happen. Can I share with you maybe like where I've started and I've really been pondering again? Two things about, this is about guarding. To very clearly, to be able to articulate to myself my weaknesses when it comes to relationship between me and another man. I can articulate it to myself. I can articulate it to Andy, which I will be doing. Remember, I said I was going to be talking to you about this. And I have articulated it to Jared. I think there is, for me, so much safety in that. And as I was writing this out, though, Andy, I thought about you and how you're wired. And that, not the, I think you have to identify your weaknesses. But this thing of where I'm saying, like, I've got to force myself to talk about it. I wonder if you've got to force yourself. I do,
not to talk about it.
To certain people. I want to put my own, how I view the world, with saying like, Melissa, talk about it. You got to talk about it. And then I'm thinking about Andy and like, that does not apply to her with these liquid boundaries. Nope. Do you remember we were in a meeting with our mentor, Dave, and our friend Crystal was there as well? Do you remember what I'm going to say?
No, I can't.
Oh my
I'm like,
gosh.
which one?
So you had a dream that very much bothers you. And it was a sexual dream. You had told Crystal and I before, like, we heard the dream. Like, and I don't think that was inappropriate, actually. I think it was helpful. We are safe people. It was helpful for you to be able to verbalize that. And then why it bothered you. I think all of that was completely appropriate. Then we get into the room with Dave.
Oh, no. I don't remember this.
Okay. I'll remind you. And you're saying that you are bothered by this dream. And then you go to say what you're like, well, and the dream was, and all three of us at once go, no! You jumped.
You, Crystal, and Dave were like,
you jumped. Did not seem to occur to you not to share that to Dave.
Oh, I'm sure. Because to me, this is so weird. And I don't understand why. I had no difference between my boundaries between men and women. And I thought that was the noble thing. I thought that was the right way to proceed, because I think my probably philosophy is live without hypocrisy. And for me, my thinking was it's hypocritical to treat men this way and women this way. So I'm going to lump them together, basically just treating everybody like women, because that's what I understand. Not a good way to go.
Identifying my areas of weakness, which there's two that I can really say I have to be careful here. What is that to you? Like, if that's what I have to do, know my areas of weakness and then share that with my husband when appropriate and a couple people around me. How do you guard now? Because I know that you're doing thinking on this these days.
Biological attraction doesn't matter.
Interesting. Of course we're opposite. Wait, what does that mean?
Okay, so I will see a very attractive man and I will verbalize to whomever's with me. To Andy, he's so cute. End of story. I move on. That is not a draw or a hook from me whatsoever.
It's the emotional.
It's 100%. That is not going to be the lure compared to you, where I've heard you. There was a man leading worship who was very attractive years ago.
At our church.
Not at our church.
Yeah, thank you.
No, at this other thing. Yeah. Although, Todd, you're super attractive. Like, I don't know. Like, all those men, we love you. But to me, there's no currency or value. And I remember people at that conference, our friends, women, saying, I can't stay focused, or that's a struggle point. And for me, I'm looking going, I don't understand. I don't resonate. That has not ever been a sticky point for me.
Now, attraction is extremely complex, and I'm making it not complex. Now, biologically, women typically, now we've got a bell curve, are attracted to security. So, and here's what I mean by security. If men are trying to impregnate women, be fruitful and multiply, which by the way they are, whether our biology doesn't know if we're married or not, it doesn't know. That's the drive, right, that got us placed in a man. The drive that he's placed in a woman is security, which means she wants to find security for her and these be fruitful and multiplies. She's trying to find security. And so the best way to find security is a lot of ways, but one of which is like men who are higher on the social status. That brings security because it brings money. They tend to be more intelligent. They tend to have a better standing within the community, which means you and your little ones are going to be safe. It also emotional security, emotional connection. That is safety. It is security. So if you're talking to a man who is being extremely attentive to you and to your needs, that is going to signal literally to your hormones. I don't mean it will signal to your heart as well, but first, before you can even realize it, it is signaling to your biology, safety, security is here. And then that's going to signal hormones that are going to start that sexual type attraction. And we can move on to talk about then what to do with it, but we can't do that today. Let us know in the comments below. Like right now, type in a comment below if you want to keep having this conversation. But that's what I mean by biology.
So what do I do when there's a connection? So for me, it's not going to be an attractive man. Ugh. Like, I just don't get that. But somebody who's attentive to me. Oh, yeah. I have learned, Melissa, really the hard way. You and I both know that. One, for me, how gratifying that connection feels is one of my hook, line, and sinkers.
That would be most women. I don't understand that, where I'm like, what does emotional affair even mean? I don't understand what that means. But I think if we're looking at a bell curve, many to most women would connect with that. So can you talk a little bit?
Yeah. So having very much had to have a conversation with my husband to say, I am not in love with somebody. I'm not, like, not even close, but I'm having feelings for somebody and have been by that point for nearly a year.
Yeah.
Which was really sad. It was heartbreaking.
This has been years ago.
Yeah, years ago. And it was really confusing because he was and is a godly person. But here's what my own woes are to myself. One, boredom for how I'm wired, needing stimulation is a big, big, big red flag. That was a hard time just contextually. I had 3 babies in diapers. They were 0, 1, and 2, and 1 and 2 and 3 years old. My husband was gone probably 50, 60, 70 hours a week working on his PhD far away, like an hour and a half away, leaving me with just hard work to do by myself. And there was at the same time, not just boredom, but my own leadership pressure I was applying. And it felt like to just have a mental space to check out and imagine, I mean, Melissa, it's so stupid, but I'm going to verbalize it because I think it needs to be verbalized. Imagining holding hands with somebody. I don't mean lust. That for me, as much sexual stimulation as I have as a woman, that's not
so you
what
mean
happened.
Romantic
Conversations, him, like, let's just push the envelope. Him saying to me, in my imagination only, I saw this man very, very little. But when I did, there was a connection, which stimulated these kind of thoughts of maybe one day his wife would get cancer and want to, you know, create, maybe both their spouses would die.
Where'd Andy go?
Yeah.
Andy is her husband.
And it's like these strange fantasies of the nest, of protection and emotional security and stimulation for me, that it would be like long, slow fantasies of him choosing me and what I would do. I want to be really clear. I did not love this person.
And I don't even know that you had lust.
No, like gross. And when I look back on that, and you know I do very regularly, to just check my heart and remind myself how foolish, that's really my objective of intentional looking back. I never want to be stuck in that spot again. Having to have that conversation through lots of prayer, through lots of
She was
small
telling
steps.
friends before telling Andy.
Hoping that would do the trick.
And it didn't. Until you told Andy.
And then that cut that thing like a cord.
Yeah. You saw, anyway, yeah.
It was terrible. And that, honestly, I thought, because I was so messed up sexually, I thought I would have an affair on Andy. Even going into the marriage going, I don't know, we'll just
bound to happen.
Yeah, we'll hope for the best here, because I knew my sexual deception and how I would have these places that I lived in and always had. Here was my reality, but I lived in these sub-realities for a quick release, and they were destructive little quick realities, sub-reality. It was weird. Then having to have that conversation with Andy about having attraction and feelings toward another man that wasn't even the neighborhood Melissa of love. It was more like a 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13-year-old girl. Really. And seeing that heartbreak on his face, I'm telling you, Melissa, I'm pretty sure that was the grace of God to my family, because it feels like today, and it's been what, 9 years? I think this
Probably,
was before Dora.
9 or 8. I can't remember.
It was pretty close.
It was long ago.
I haven't even touched that with a 10-foot pole Because one, I don't think I need that anymore. Now, that doesn't make me ironclad or highly aware. I just am not going to have conversations alone with men.
Well, let's talk, and then we got to wrap up here, but let's talk about the one boundary that you're just like, oh, I think this is a good rule of thumb.
Yeah, so a rule of thumb is I've really wondered, how do you have a brother in Christ? I don't even mean a friend. You know what I mean? It's a brother. There's that responsibility in my mind before a friend. Because then I swung, of course, all the way away from men. Well, I'm just not going to be with men because I don't want to put Andy or me in that position again. But that's not real life. And it's not healthy. And so this new-ish boundary that I've just it's kind of, Melissa, at this point, the one boundary that I feel firm on, and it doesn't feel extreme, and it feels doable, and it feels like how I'm wired, that works with me, is I'm just not going to have deep spiritual and emotional conversations with men about something that I haven't already had a conversation about with Andy. Like, he gets the first, you know what I mean? There's some men with some conversations that I had talked to you about wanting to have really good, encouraging things, but I just was like, I don't know. I don't know if I feel good about sending this message to this person. And it was like, why? And I was like, oh, because I need to have that conversation because it was about my heart, about my feelings, and about what God was doing in me. I need to do that first with my husband. Then that creates the connection at the right point. After that, it's sort of like free game. It's not deep and meaningful and almost secretive and connecty. I've done that. And then, you know, when the first time you verbalize something that's significant to you, that time matters for me. For the second, third, fourth time, it doesn't matter. So therefore, I'm not looking and needing the connection from, in this example, that person. I don't want to give it to him. I don't want to give it to him. I don't want to get it to him. I had the need met by talking to Andy about it.
Did that take away the need to no longer is like, oh, I want to share this with so-and-so.
And now it's not going to be this deep thing. I haven't felt like, and I wondered, should I go ahead and pop on? Because I think it would encourage him. I think it'd be a really beneficial conversation. And what I said to you a week or so ago is, when I do, you better believe you're going to be in that Marco Polo video group, is to you, to me, and that person included, because I don't want his spouse to hop on and be like, wow, those are deep conversations. And that feels weird. If somebody were talking about this to Andy, I'd be like,
excuse me,
I don't think that feels right.
Yeah.
That's not right. So I think there's probably two boundaries here. I'm going to go first to my husband with deep heart, God moving in me kinds of things first. That's going to alleviate my own desire for connection in that area. And second, I think I'm going to just
go in threes.
Let's go in threes.
Let's go in threes.
Because then there's
safety
no
in
connection
numbers.
that is just him and I know and felt and experienced together. That is, for many women, including me, the breeding ground for those emotional things that we don't have much control over once that connection establishes.
So, friends, I hope this conversation has been helpful to you. I don't think it's one we're having enough of within the church. Yeah. And so if you want to hear more on this topic, I will bring my friends in and we'll talk more about this. So anyway, just leave your comments below and I will see you next week. Say bye, Andy.
Bye, guys. So we just pray for our YouTube friends all the time. All right. Bye, YouTube friends.
Bye. See ya.
It's been fun joining you guys.
Just say bye.
Nope.